There's a product sitting on a pallet in almost every farm and agricultural supply store in the country, and it costs less than a large pizza for a bag that would treat an average home lawn several times over. Farmers buy it by the ton because it rebuilds soil that has been worked hard for generations. Almost nobody with a suburban yard has ever picked it up, because it is not marketed to homeowners. It does not have a picture of a perfect lawn on the front, and it is not sitting next to the fertilizer at the garden center. In the next 15 minutes, I'm going to walk you through exactly what this product is, the actual science behind why it works better than most bagged lawn fertilizer, and how to use it correctly, so you're not wasting your money or your time. This is not a gimmick, and it is not a miracle powder. It is basic soil chemistry that professional turf managers and large-scale growers have relied on for decades, and once you understand it, buying an expensive branded lawn feed every spring is going to feel like a very expensive habit you never needed. Before we get into it, if you want a complete system for cutting your lawn care costs without sacrificing results, the book linked in the description and pinned in the comments covers everything about the lawn. Our readers are saving an average of $1,000 a year in lawn care costs. Every video here is built around the same goal: spend less and get a better lawn. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next. Now let's get back to the video. When you spread a standard synthetic fertilizer on your lawn, you're feeding the grass plant directly and doing almost nothing for the soil underneath it. Most of the nitrogen in a typical bag is water-soluble, which means it dissolves and becomes available to the plant almost immediately, in a large concentrated dose. The grass responds fast. Within a few days, you get that deep green color that makes the whole yard look transformed, and it is genuinely satisfying to see. The issue shows up a few weeks later. Because the nitrogen is soluble, it does not stay in place. Rain and irrigation carry a large portion of it down past the root zone before the plant can use it, and what the grass did absorb was spent almost entirely on fast, soft leaf growth rather than anything that builds a stronger plant over time. Once that nitrogen is gone, the color fades, the growth slows, and the lawn looks tired again, usually within 3 to 4 weeks depending on rainfall and mowing habits. At that point, the only thing the label tells you to do is apply again. That cycle is not a flaw in the system. It is largely how the system is designed to work, because a lawn that needs reapplication every month sells more fertilizer than one that does not. The deeper issue is that most residential soil, especially soil in newer developments where topsoil was stripped and subsoil was graded flat, has very little ability to hold on to nutrients in the first place. You can add all the nitrogen, potassium, and phosphorus you want, but if the soil itself has nowhere to store it, a large percentage washes straight through. Agronomists measure this storage ability with something called cation exchange capacity, and it is one of the most important properties of soil that almost no homeowner has ever heard of. Understanding it is the entire key to why the cheap product I'm about to show you works as well as it does, and why expensive fertilizer alone will never fully fix a struggling lawn. Cation exchange capacity, usually shortened to CEC, describes how many nutrient particles a given volume of soil can physically hold on to. Most of the nutrients your grass needs, including calcium, magnesium, potassium, and ammonium nitrogen, carry a slight positive electrical charge. Soil particles that carry a negative charge attract and hold those nutrients, the way a magnet holds a metal filing, keeping them available near the root zone instead of letting them wash away with the next rain. Clay particles and organic matter both carry strong negative charges, which is why clay-heavy or organically rich soil tends to hold fertility well. Sandy soil and soil that has been stripped of organic matter, which describes a huge share of residential lawns built on graded fill dirt, has very few of these negative charge sites. That kind of soil behaves less like a sponge and more like a strainer. You can pour nutrients in, but there's nowhere for them to stay, so they pass straight through to groundwater instead of feeding the plant. This is the actual reason a lot of homeowners feel like they are fertilizing constantly and never getting ahead. The problem was never a lack of nutrients being applied. It was a lack of storage capacity in the soil to hold on to what was already being applied. Adding more fertilizer to soil with low CEC is a bit like pouring water into a bucket with holes in the bottom. Pouring faster does not solve the actual problem. What solves it is fixing the bucket. And that means increasing the soil's ability to hold and slowly release nutrients over time, rather than continuing to dump more product on top of a system that cannot retain it. The product that raises cation exchange capacity more effectively than almost anything else available is humic acid, usually sold at agricultural supply stores as humic granules, humate, or soil conditioner. It's typically derived from a natural material called leonardite, which is a soft, dark, carbon-rich rock form from ancient organic matter, mostly plant material that decomposed and compressed over an extremely long period of geologic time. Leonardite is often described as an intermediate stage between peat and lignite coal, and it is mined in several regions of the United States with significant deposits in North Dakota. Once processed into granules or a soluble powder, humic acid becomes one of the most concentrated natural sources of negatively charged organic material you can add to soil. Because humic molecules carry such a high density of negative charge sites, adding even a modest amount to soil meaningfully increases its cation exchange capacity. In practical terms, this means the soil becomes far better at grabbing and holding onto nutrients instead of letting them leach away. Farmers apply humic products across large acreage specifically to rebuild soil that has lost organic matter from decades of intensive cropping, and the same basic chemistry applies at a smaller scale to a home lawn. The product is sold in bulk agricultural bags because the customer base is farmers treating dozens or hundreds of acres, which is exactly why the price per pound is so low compared to anything marketed directly at homeowner. You're essentially paying agricultural bulk pricing for a material that does the same job whether it is spread across a wheat field or a quarter-acre yard. Increasing storage capacity is only part of what humic acid does. A separate and arguably more important function is something called chelation. Many of the micronutrients your lawn needs, particularly iron, manganese, and zinc, are often already present in residential soil in reasonable quantities. The problem is that these minerals frequently exist in chemical forms that plant roots cannot absorb because they have bonded tightly with other elements in the soil into compounds that are essentially locked away from the plant. Humic acid molecules are able to bind loosely around these locked mineral ions, a process soil chemists call chelation, and hold them in a form that plant roots and the microorganisms around those roots can actually take up and use. This explains a pattern that soil scientists and turf managers have documented repeatedly. Lawns treated with humic acid products often show noticeable improvement even when very little additional fertilizer is applied because the humic acid is making existing soil minerals available rather than adding large amounts of brand new nutrients. Iron in particular plays a major role in chlorophyll production, and chlorophyll is what gives grass its deep green color. A lot of the rich, almost blue-green color you see on well-maintained golf courses and professionally managed turf comes from steady iron availability paired with balanced, slow nutrient release rather than from heavy nitrogen application alone. Nitrogen-driven green tends to look pale and grow out fast. Iron-supported green tends to look deeper and hold its color for much longer, which is one of the visible differences between a lawn fed mostly on synthetic nitrogen and one supported by healthier underlying soil chemistry. The most significant long-term change humic acid produces is not really about color at all. It is about root depth, and root depth is what determines how a lawn handles drought, heat, and foot traffic over time. When grass receives a large, fast dose of soluble nitrogen, it responds the way most plants do when food is suddenly abundant near the surface. It puts its energy into rapid top growth and does not need to send roots deep in search of water and nutrients because everything it needs is being delivered right at the surface. Lawns maintained primarily on synthetic fertilizer often develop shallow root systems, sometimes only an inch or two deep, which leaves them vulnerable the moment watering becomes inconsistent or a dry stretch hits. Soil that has been improved with humic acid behaves differently because nutrients are released more gradually and are distributed more evenly through the root zone instead of arriving all at once near the surface. Grass grown in that kind of soil tends to develop a more extensive root system, often reaching several inches to well over half a foot deep depending on grass type and soil conditions, as the plant searches through a larger volume of soil for consistent nutrition. A deep root system is directly tied to drought tolerance because the plant has access to moisture held lower in the soil profile long after the surface has dried out. It also tends to compete more effectively against shallow-rooted weeds since dense, well-established turf leaves fewer open gaps for weed seeds to establish. None of this happens overnight. Building root depth is a gradual process that plays out over a full growing season or more, but it is the difference between a lawn that needs constant babying and one that can handle a stretch of hot, dry weather without turning brown. Before spending money on any product, it helps to actually understand what condition your soil is in, and there are two easy checks you can do yourself without any lab equipment. The first is a basic penetration test. Take a long flathead screwdriver or a soil probe and try to push it straight down into your lawn in a few different spots, ideally when the soil is not freshly watered so you get an honest reading. If it stops hard within the first inch or two and you have to lean your body weight into it, your soil is compacted and almost certainly has very little organic matter or structure, which usually means low cation exchange capacity and shallow root potential. Now try the same test in a flower bed or under a tree where leaves and organic debris have been breaking down naturally for years. In most cases, the screwdriver slides in noticeably easier and deeper in that second spot. That difference in resistance is a rough physical demonstration of the difference organic matter makes to soil structure, and it is the same difference humic acid is designed to help create in your lawn over time. The second check is simply tracking how long your lawn actually stays green after a normal fertilizer application. Mark the date you fertilize and pay attention to when the color starts fading again. For lawns maintained purely on standard synthetic fertilizer, that window is often surprisingly short, frequently under a month depending on rainfall, mowing frequency, and grass type. Once you start tracking this pattern, it becomes a useful baseline. If you switch to a soil program that includes humic acid and notice the color holding longer with less frequent applications, that is a fairly direct sign the underlying soil chemistry is genuinely improving rather than just responding to another round of fast nitrogen. When you are ready to buy, skip the small decorative bottles marketed specifically for lawns and head to a farm or agricultural supply store instead. Look for bags labeled humic granules, humate humic acid, or soil conditioner, and check that the source is listed as leonardite, since that is the most concentrated and well-studied natural source of humic substances used in agriculture. A single bag from an agricultural supplier typically costs a fraction of what a similarly sized specialty lawn product costs, and because application rates are low, one bag usually covers a home lawn multiple times over the course of a season. Application is straightforward. Use a standard broadcast or drop spreader to apply the granules evenly across the lawn at the rate listed on the bag, since rates can vary somewhat by product concentration. Unlike synthetic nitrogen, which can burn grass applied too heavily, humic acid granules carry very little risk of that kind of damage, which gives you some margin for error as a homeowner. After spreading, water the lawn thoroughly. This step matters more than people assume because watering carries the granules down into contact with the soil where the actual cation exchange and mineral chelation processes take place, rather than leaving them sitting inert on top of the grass blades. Timing also matters. Applying humic acid in early spring gives the lawn a chance to start building deeper roots before the stress of summer heat arrives, which is exactly when that extra root depth pays off. A second application in fall supports soil biology while it is still active and helps set the lawn up for a stronger start the following spring, rather than asking it to recover from winter dormancy with nothing in reserve. If you want to accelerate results further at very little extra cost, pairing humic acid applications with a light top dressing of compost or simply leaving your grass clippings on the lawn instead of bagging them after mowing adds a slow, steady source of organic nutrients for the improved soil to hold and release. The humic acid builds the storage capacity, and the compost or clippings give it something worthwhile to store, which together support the soil microorganisms that ultimately do most of the real work of feeding a healthy lawn. The pattern that keeps a lot of lawns stuck in a cycle of looking great for a few weeks and then fading again usually has very little to do with the brand of fertilizer being used. It comes down to whether the soil underneath the grass has the structure to actually hold onto nutrients and support deep root growth, or whether it is simply passing everything through like a strainer. Cation exchange capacity, chelation, and root depth are not marketing terms. They are established concepts in soil science that farmers and turf professionals have relied on for a long time, and the material that improves all three, humic acid derived from leonardite, has been sitting in plain view at agricultural supply stores the entire time, priced for farmers rather than for a curated garden center display.